So feel free to call in 813-418-6822. So as I was saying before, Dr. Stark called. There was this rush at that moment when I was doing this work to like, oh my word, I have experienced a lot of ghostly bathrooms, you know, and the first one would probably be in Charlesgate, at least the first one that I can really document, where there were always people talking about weird things happening in the bathroom, lights going on and off. And if you know the Charlesgate Hotel, it's where I went. It was my dorm in college, but it was also a ridiculously haunted place that over the years had gotten a reputation for being haunted, right? And it had been so many things, and so many people had supposedly died there. Everyone from the victims of mafia violence to a little girl in an elevator, all these kind of traditional folklore things. My shirt's all messed up here. But there's this idea that the bathrooms were especially haunted. And so one of the ones which, you know, I didn't really even think of till just now would be, of course, the story of federal government, which I'm going to give you a really short version of it if you've never heard it before, which is in April, like around this time in 1994, 95. My friend Brad, the guy who wrote the theme music to the show, came into he had gone off to college in Indiana. He's from Indiana. He gone to IU and he came back to visit during his school's spring break. We were still in session, and we became obsessed with the Ouija board. And the Ouija board was actually technically banned in Charlesgate. You weren't supposed to use it in Charlesgate. It was like against the rules, although I've never heard of anyone actually getting in trouble. I think that was just part of the urban mystique of the urban legend mystique of the hotel. And there was a spirit. I'm not going to give you the whole story. There was a spirit that wanted to kill my roommate at the time because he was a playa, right? We had joked about it, that he didn't treat women well, but we had joked about the fact that he was going through the alphabet because he happened to sleep with an A, a B, a C, and a D, and an E in like the first quarter of the year, the first few months of the school year. I'm like, dude, do you realize you're doing this? And he's like, no, but now that I've done it, I'm looking for an F. And this spirit, for kind of some weird reasons, wanted to kill him because he hurt women. On one of the nights we were doing the Ouija board, the spirit got on, said, I'm going to kill you, all this kind of stuff, and then said to Matt, Matt went, this is stupid, I'm going to go take a shower. And he went into the bathroom, and several different times, the last time being when he was completely soaking wet, the lights went out in the actual shower, and he went up, not thinking, he went up to adjust it, soaking wet. Like he could have gotten electrocuted, he could have died. This is weird because as we're playing on the Ouija board, federal government is going AC/DC, AC/DC, AC/DC. And so it was this idea that electricity was involved. And we wouldn't have made that connection unless he hadn't come in as soon as it was going, ha, 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 AC/DC, AC/DC. We're like, you want us to play AC/DC music? Like, what are you talking about? And then he comes in and tells us a story about almost becoming electrocuted. It's a very long story that involves a lot of different things, but that's kind of one of the first bathroom thing that I could think of was that. And I'm going to go through some of these other ones, and I'm going to leave the ones that I think other people might hit on if they call in. But the first one that really stuck out, like it hit me like this, probably because I was working on another Schaefer location ghost, would be the Devil's Tree. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with the Devil's Tree, you've got to listen to our episodes on it. You've got to read about it in Mark Muncie's book, read about it online. But the Devil's Tree is probably the scariest place in all of Florida, in that it is this tree that incorrectly is cited as the location of this double murder, which actually did not happen at the tree, or the bodies weren't found at the tree. They were found off, and this tree has become indestructible. Two women were supposedly killed by Gerald John Schaefer at this location, at least in the park where the tree is. And since then, nothing but bad stuff has happened there. Satanic cults are supposed to go there for rituals, and in addition to that, people have tried to destroy the tree. And if you look at the pictures, it's been burned. If you know our story, when we went to the tree, we had a lot of really bad stuff happen to us right afterwards. Mainly because we took the bark, which you're not supposed to do, but we took it as part of the legend trip. But one of the often overlooked aspects of that haunting is the fact that for one reason or another, and I think it's a crossing of these two things that we're talking about, for one reason or another, the bathrooms, the ladies' bathrooms, are supposed to be haunted. And so when we first went there, that is the first picture we took. It was the first Facebook Live we did, was going into those bathrooms and seeing if we could contact the spirit of these murdered women who, for one reason or another, now that wouldn't be stuck there. Now it might make sense because that bathroom where it's situated, the canals are here, the bathroom is here. So if we go with that whole folklore idea of ghosts can't cross water, then they would literally be trapped between the plumbing of the bathroom and the canals, because their bodies are found closer to the canal than to the actual tree. That was definitely one that I had. It popped into my head, and I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, that's right, the Devil's Tree." The next one that I wanted to talk about was in Silver Springs. So again, one of my favorite legend trips of all time. We went to Silver Springs to track down these ghost stories that had to do with love sleeps, right? They had to do with all of these kind of ideas of these two lovers are not allowed to be together, so they commit suicide, or one of them dies, one of them kills himself, the other one gives himself up. All of these great legends that are coming out of this place, which used to be before Disney, this was like the big travel place to go. This was like the big amusement park kind of place that was happening. And it was extremely popular. And so we went there, tracking down those legends, seeing if we could maybe we could do some of the love rituals and see if we could bring love into our life. All these really funny things. It's a good episode. You've got to listen to it. And when we got there, we were told that no one really knew about those stories at all. But, and here was the weird part, this place is totally haunted. Like, every person we talked to who worked there had the same kind of approach, which was, I've never heard that story before. Even some of the old timers captains were like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that story a little bit. But really, then they would say, but have you heard this story? And then they would tell us a firsthand experience that they had gone through. While we were there, and I believe we didn't hear the story until afterwards. So this happened to us. And then the very next thing that happened was that someone told us the explanation for this without us asking. Was that there's this, in Silver Springs, there's this hallway which has some artifacts, right? So some of the artifacts are from the early days of Silver Springs Park, but other of these artifacts are things that were found in the actual water at Silver Springs and dug up. And one of them is a canoe. And this canoe is supposed to maybe potentially be one of the canoes in the story. So the three different legends, two of them involve canoes in one way or another. This might be one of those boats. And it's there. And so we were walking down this hallway trying to get a ranger to talk to us, because we've always had good luck with rangers. And we came across the bathroom. And we were kind of just hanging out there for a little bit, and we started to hear this weird scratchy noise. And the weird scratchy noise reminded Natalie and I of when we were talking about something haunted while we were recording an episode, and the scratching kept happening, and we followed it through the house to this one location. We couldn't, and yet it was only happening when we were talking about this ghost stuff. It was the same exact noise. It was really crazy because here we are, 100 miles away from the house, and yet we're hearing the same exact noise. And so we went to the bathroom, and we immediately started filming as we're talking, and the bathroom door, and I'll post the video of this in it, the bathroom door opens. And then we kind of catch the end of it, and we try to get it to open again, but it very clearly opens. We tried to create that same wind tunnel to see if we could get that door to open, and it kind of opened on command the first time. We couldn't recreate it to get that door open. We happened to, right after that, talk to an employee who said that she had seen a ghost in that bathroom, and that there was an ongoing legend that there was a spirit trapped in that bathroom, specifically a Native American spirit that was trapped in there, and that she couldn't find her way out of there. And that was this one of these women had heard secondhand, I believe, that she was in the bathroom, and she, just like Dr. Stark had talked about Agnes, that she was kind of having a conversation with her, and when she came out, there was a Native American woman there who then just disappeared. So there's all these different stories having to do with that specific bathroom that I thought was really interesting. The next two I'm going to talk about are not necessarily specific legend trips, but they're kind of famous ghostly bathrooms that I've been into. And the first one is the Country Tavern. So if anyone lives anywhere near Amherst, Nashua, in that area, you know of the Country Tavern and just how ridiculously haunted this place is supposed to be. So the legend goes, and actually this is the very first thing I ever published, was in Jeff Belanger's Encyclopedia of Haunted Places. I did the write-up on the Country Tavern in Nashua. And the story goes that Elizabeth, her husband was a sea captain, went off to sea like 200 years ago, went out to sea. He came back and to discover that his wife was like 4 months pregnant, and he had been gone for 5 months, right? So something's not adding up. So he killed her, excuse me, he hacked her up, and he threw her in the well on the property. And since then, Elizabeth comes back to the Country Tavern, comes back to where her house was, and continues to haunt it. And the most famously haunted place within there, what she does is she messes with the doors and the water of the ladies' restroom, right? So if you are a lady and you feel someone playing with your hair, or if the doors are going crazy, you might just be getting a glimpse into Elizabeth's world. So one time I can't remember, because my parents love that place. It's like they used to live there practically, because they live right down the street anyway, and so that was their favorite place to go eat. Like that's where we did special occasions, including all the fancy dinners, but then also like my dad's like 50th birthday, I think it was, we did there. We did, all I remember is there was a belly dancer. But then we also did my baby shower there. Not my baby shower, but the baby shower for Devin, where I got what to me is the most convincing picture of a ghost. Like, I'm not big on the whole orb phenomenon, but this is a ridiculously clear, three-dimensional sources of light orb in this picture, which happens to be sitting next to, or right like next to my sister, who is Devin's godmother, right? So all the elements are there. Like if you were a woman who had been killed while you were pregnant, that would be the perfect place for you to go and kind of like haunt, right? It would be this place where other people had were celebrating birth. You can't you'll never see your child, and so you would be there. Sorry, gotta turn that off. And then, of course, one of the times I went there, there was a crazy haunted door that was like waving back and forth. So one of the times we went there just for an occasion, it might have been my dad's 50th. I decided that I was going to experiment, and knowing that the majority of the restaurant at that time was my family, I would be pretty safe. I decided to go into the ladies' room with a makeshift Ouija board, like on a piece of paper, folded out like in my pocket, and try to contact Elizabeth. So I have no story to back that up. Like, that was pretty much all that I did. I went in there, and eventually one of my aunts came in and they were like, "Why are you in here?" And I'm like, "Oh, my mom dropped something and I was looking for it for her." And I left. I don't think that aunt has talked to me since. But it was once again me trying to communicate with this whole idea of there's a ghost in the bathroom. Why is she haunting only the girls' side or the girls' room? We don't know. And then the last, before I get into some of these urban legends having to do with it, is in the Lizzie Borden house. So if anyone here has kind of been to the Lizzie Borden house or knows about this bathroom thing, again, weird things going on here. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. We're back on. The new layout's really messing with me. So if you don't know the Lizzie Borden house, like, hello? What are you talking about? Lizzie Borden supposedly killed her parents. It's still called the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, even though she hasn't owned it for years. And obviously, she's been dead for quite a while. But she notoriously was charged with the massacre of her father and her stepmother. And the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast is supposed to be, I mean, every year, and I guess to some degree this has stopped and it's kind of been overcome. But for a while, it was always like ranked as like number one on like the most haunted places in America. And it is my kids were asking me about it, and a friend of mine was asking me about it. I'm like, I have never been there and not had something weird happen. It is ridiculously haunted, and it's also fun because it's history. It's the whole mystique of it. It's literature. It's true crime. It's the perfect storm of of all the things we love about the unexplained and about it. They all happen in this house. Second time I was there. I'm going to call it the pear bathroom, but I'm not sure if there's an official name for it. It is supposed to be one of the most haunted parts of the house that kind of like insiders know. I went there. It was the time when I went to cover the story on Jackie Barrett and the whole possession of Bridget and all that kind of stuff. And Jackie was telling me a story about how she had something happen in the bathroom. And I was like, okay, all right, that's interesting. And up to that point, I would say the number of paranormal experiences I had was probably pretty limited. We're talking early on in Mass Crossroads days. So there wasn't a lot that I had done, experienced, I should say, in terms of an actual ghost. And as I was, I went to the same bathroom. As I was going to the bathroom, I very clearly felt that I was being watched. And there's something weird about the wallpaper in there, if I'm not mistaken, that like it looks like it's moving. There's like a gold glint to it. So already it's kind of got a creepy thing. Jackie had just told me this story. I felt like I was being watched in the bathroom. And as we talked about in the first part of the episode, this idea of being vulnerable, of like something watching you in the most uncomfortable and vulnerable place is where a lot of the terror of bathroom things come from, right? The bathroom ghosts come from. I don't know what that just was, but that was crazy. So as I'm going to the bathroom and getting this feeling, I get up and I wash my hands. And then I turn and I shut off the water. I turn to leave, and the water turns back on again. And that's a really common theme in ghost in haunted bathrooms is this idea of the water turning on when it's not supposed to, or flushing when it's not supposed to. And so I kind of go to turn it off, and before my hand reaches it, it turns off. And the weird thing is that I didn't see either time the knob move. It just kind of went shh, started flowing, and I went to go change it, and it went off. So I was like, all right, that's kind of weird. So that was another one. And one actually I didn't write here, but now that I'm thinking about it, if you've listened to the episode of when we took our road trip like 3 years ago now, and we were in the Braymore in Greensboro, and Biltmore, not Braymore, the Biltmore, and I got my butt touched by a ghost, right? Lydia, this redheaded ghost that's supposed to haunt this what they call the pink room, she touched my butt, right? I was brushing my teeth, Natalie was in the shower, the ghost touched my butt and then started playing with the water. And we have some really interesting EVPs from that incident as well. So that's another example of like a haunted bathroom. And so it's weird because if you kind of make a list, you're like, oh, here are the places I've been. You start to see that the bathroom plays its way or finds its way into a lot of the different stories, right? And Terry, if you haven't heard that whole episode, you have to either listen to the episode or I'll tell you the whole story because it's pretty crazy. So let's talk about some of the legends, right? And so Dr. Stark and I kind of hit upon Moaning Myrtle a little bit, so I won't get into that, but I want to get into the two main mirror ones. And the first one is Bloody Mary. And I'm not going to get too much into the background of Bloody Mary because we've done episode all about it before, right? So we've done that episode. I'll put that in the notes so people can experience it. But it's the whole idea of, for different reasons, you go in, and I don't know why I'm explaining Bloody Mary. Everyone knows what Bloody Mary is, but you go into a bathroom at a certain time, depending on generationally where you're placed, and you look into the mirror and you say Bloody Mary a certain amount of time, and then something happens, right? So that once again depends on where you are generationally. It could be she scratches your face. It could be you blow out the candle and she appears behind you in red. It could be that she sucks you through the mirror. It could be that she kills you. It could be that she comes and you can summon her and send her off someplace. The earliest aspects of this legend have to do with a woman who is disfigured, right? And she cannot stand to look in the mirror anymore or go into the bathroom to look into the mirror because for one reason or another, sometimes it's burned, sometimes it's cut. She can't stand to look at herself. And so she avoids doing that, and that somehow traps her in the mirror. And Mary Worth is supposed to be the name of the original Bloody Mary. And so you're supposed to say Mary Worth, Mary Worth, Mary Worth, as opposed to just Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. But it's this whole idea, once again, while that's not gender specific, there is an element of that of being female, right? Like, so it's much more one of those things that you hear females discuss more than males, right? So guys aren't challenging each other to go and do Bloody Mary as much as girls are doing it. And it's funny because I just did, with this whole distance learning thing, I just did a whole section on folklore, and one of the assignments was, okay, now take folklore that you've heard and do this assignment. Like I did the first assignment, they were supposed to do the second. And every class I had at least two people want to do Bloody Mary or variations of Bloody Mary, and all of them were women. And I started to think like, oh, well, that makes sense because going through the years, it's always a female who brings up the Bloody Mary story. And this would be pre my current job. So it would be really adolescent girls because it would be middle school, generally 7th grade girls. And they would always bring up Bloody Mary. And I'd always say, all right, well, go do it. I'll give you extra credit. I'll give you an A in the class if you go to the bathroom and do it. And none of them will ever do it. And then we have that really great moment where my daughter is talking about Bloody Mary, and it's got to be done at 3:00. So it's this whole idea that there is something kind of going on with that looking in the mirror and that mystique of it that kind of extends just beyond whether you're going to get scratched or whether you're something. It taps into a fear we have, and you know how you know it really taps into a fear we have is that it doesn't stop. It generationally moves on, and it molds itself to whatever time period it's in. And it's really one of those things where all literature is a representation of the life and times during which it was written. All Bloody Mary is a representation of the time that it's in, right? So it's constantly evolving and it stays fresh. And we're going to have an episode, maybe tripping on legends with kids, maybe not tripping on legends with kids, but I think it's going to be a series of urban legends that I'm going to then edit together into one episode. But it's urban legends you can do in your home. And so I posted about this, and obviously Bloody Mary's got to be one of them because it's the one that you can do in your house that every single person knows. Now, it's really interesting because I put it out there for other people to talk about what urban legends happen in your house. So I put that out on Facebook, facebook.com/tripping on legends. I put it on the Instagram, Spooky Tripping. I put it on Snapchat even. I put it out on everywhere. And the adults who have responded, this is the interesting part, which tells us about today. The adults who responded to a person didn't get the posting, didn't understand what it was about, and they gave me an urban legend that they knew of, like a scary haunted urban legend that they knew of. That was outside. I'm like, well, the whole point of this is that you're inside. I did the same thing to my students, and they gave me urban legends that happen inside the house. Now, my students notoriously do not pay attention. So what's the disconnect there? And the disconnect is there, and as I was talking to my daughter, it kind of was coming upon me, is that they live in an isolated world. I'm going to get into this a lot more, but they live in an isolated world where their online life is oftentimes their life. They don't go out as often as we do at an older age when we were kids, right? So something that's an urban legend gets passed on the computer. So you have like the Momo challenge, you have like the Blue Whale, you have these other ones that involve, these sites that involve TikTok, that involve the video game ones escaping me right now, but that involve doing this community type challenge, dare, ghost, creepy, scary, freak you out stuff, but they do it in their online world and so they were so much easier to come up with those examples because that's the world that they live in. So I'm going to get into that a lot more as I figure out what other 4 ones I'm going to do. We want 5 altogether. But the natural brother, cousin, child of Bloody Mary is Candyman. So Candyman is in a lot of ways takes the elements of Bloody Mary. It's not just the male version of Bloody Mary, right? Because there's a whole backstory that has to do with Candyman and what led to his death. But in essence, Candyman is a story of race and class in conflict with each other, which is reflected in this whole mirror idea. And if you don't know Candyman, do I need to explain Candyman to people? But the idea that the story goes that a black man was having an affair with, and I think he's a man of means. Like he's not a slave. He's not he's well off, and he's having an affair with a white woman, and that pisses off the community, who then beat him, torture him, cover him in the honey of a beehive, and then let the bees sting him to death. And I can't remember how he even gets the hook for a hand, but he has a hook for a hand. And fast forward 100 years, if you are in this area of Chicago, this really poor area of Chicago with these projects that are known as Cabrini Green, if you look in the mirror and you say his name 5 times, Candyman will appear and drag you to hell, essentially, or kill you, drag you to hell, all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting, like they're doing a remake of it, and I trust Jordan Peele, and yet I'm concerned because based on the trailers, that racial aspect seems to be twisted into what it originally was. I trust that it's going to be a good movie, but I'm a little hesitant. But the point of the story was that Cabrini Green it was built to be projects, and then it was converted to luxury apartments for upper class white people, and that created a natural racial and social tension between the black people who live there and the white people who live there. And then there was these urban legends, which may or may not be true. I'm pretty sure they were true, that because of the way they were originally designed, you could actually come through the mirror. So if you could crawl through the wall and come through the mirror because of some maintenance thing that had been established when they were first built. And it's this idea of gentrification, of like, you know, stripping away the culture and the society. And so the pushback of that is this black male version who's usually a lot more violent of Bloody Mary. So it takes the well-known, established, comfortable, if you will, legend of Bloody Mary and adds this kind of racial aspect to it. And so, you know, you really get to see that Bloody Mary is a tree, and people can just hang their ornaments on it and kind of mold it to what they need. Which brings me to, and this is probably the last one I'm going to get into tonight, which brings me into the ones that I talked about for a little bit with Dr. Stark. We kind of touched upon it. And that is the Hanako. And that was the kind of genesis for all of this. If you want to physically think of what the Hanako look like. So they are, depending on the lore that you believe or the lore you follow, and I don't honestly think in Japanese culture there is a break in this. I'm sure that exists. They are a ghostly spirit, a demon, that is said to haunt school bathrooms. And Dr. Stark used the example, or used a word, which I'm going to try to always butcher, which is yokai. The idea that it's a very fine line between demon and ghost, not the way it's kind of clearly defined in Western culture. This legend can be tracked back at least 70 years, right? So we're talking for 70 years, these stories have kind of taken shape and they've kind of been in existence. And it's not until about 20 years ago that they really start rising in popularity. And it is become a pop culture sensation. So even though there are elements of what I'm going to talk about with the Hanako that you might recognize, like, oh, I've heard that story before, or yeah, you just said that was borrowed from this. They do also, there's some elements of it that do seem to uniquely be Japanese. One of the things is that, I'll get into it's usually a female looks like. And it's usually a tween, pre-adolescent girl who has a black bobbed haircut. And I described it when I was talking with Dr. Stark as having somewhat of an androgynous feel to it. But she is essentially a little Japanese schoolgirl. She's usually wearing a dress or a uniform, which is almost always described as being red. So let's take that and let's hold that ghostly appearance. And then there's also another variation of the story in which she is chopped in half. So she has no lower body. She just has upper body, still sometimes wearing the dress, but she can't get around, and she's kind of stuck in the toilet. And she has this kind of like, in those much more of a pale face. There's no, I'm going to use the word seductive, but I don't mean it that way. I mean it more of like she befriends you a little bit in the other form. In that other form, she's more evil. So it's almost like one's the kind of more ghostly version and one's the more demony version. Her origins are across the board. So some people say that she was, and this would fit in with the 70 years. Excuse me. She was in school, and I guess I could say this is a school legend. This happens in school bathrooms. She was involved in a bombing during World War II. So her school that she was in was bombed by the Allies. It collapsed on her. They rebuilt the school on the same site, but because she died, and this explains like being cut in half too. Because she died on that location, she's said to haunt the bathrooms. And then that's kind of unique to that location. But then the other ones are all, and we touched on this a little bit, they're all, we've heard them before. Either she committed suicide, she was being bullied, or for other reasons, she commits suicide in the bathroom and she's stuck there. Or it's sometimes said that she is dragged into the bathroom or surprised in the bathroom by an escaped lunatic who then kills her, and she's stuck there because of that. And then, of course, the last one, which we got into a lot more with Dr. Stark, which is the idea that whether it was suicide or beating to death, that bullies ambush her in the bathroom, and she's stuck there from her death on that. And that bullying one especially carries over to the male version, which is seen in the guy's bathroom. And it's a ritual, like which seems really weird, but once again, it's the Bloody Mary aspect of it. Like, so sometimes you're cursed and she comes upon you, and then other times you call her, you want the Hanako for one reason or another. You want to talk to her, you want to communicate with her. So there's a whole ritual, and the ritual once again has to do with that numerology we've talked about, which is you go into a bathroom and you have to go into the third floor bathroom. You have to go to the third stall. Now, they don't say whether it's from the door or from the back or whatever, but you have to go into the third stall. You have to knock on that stall door 3 times, and then she will invite you in, or you then say, she'll then, you can talk to her, you can call her name, all those kinds of things. She'll call your name, and then the interactions can begin. When that happens, that's the safe version of her. And it's said that if you invite her and then you insult her, she'll kill you. But you can actually see the ghost and communicate with the ghost by going through that ritual. Now, sometimes that interaction doesn't go well if you're not the one who starts it. So it's said that if you have conditions that mirror hers, right? Like you've been bullied, or you're the bully, or you're suffering from stress, that oftentimes in Japanese schools, especially if it's on the 3rd floor, the Hanako will come to take you away, right? And one of the things that we talked about earlier was this idea of red or blue. And so she'll talk to you, and you'll think you're talking to a human, and then she'll ask you, you realize that you're out of paper, and so you ask for paper, and if never ask for paper, because if you do, she'll say red or blue, and at that point you're gone. And if you say red, then she kills you, bites you, eats you, something that causes all the blood to kind of squirt. And if you say blue, then she suffocates you until you run out of oxygen and you turn blue. Along with this, and I'm already starting to kind of feel like I don't want to go to the bathroom for the rest of the night because now I'm freaked out. But along with this, it's said that she'll appear, like actually literally come from underneath. That, like we said, a comfort station, you open up the door and she is halfway coming out of it. And that's kind of the cutoff one. So there are all these variations, and it really is the most popular with that demographic, with preteen girls who are suffering from all those different anxieties and all those different things are the ones that are seeing these Hanako, and they, to the point that it causes hysteria. Girls don't go to the bathroom. You can call people. Honestly, genuinely believe you can call on it and send it to someone. It's this odd, both fear and anxiety, but then also this embracing of it. That this is something you can make your friend, and you can befriend. And that might be the seductive part of like summoning anything that's somewhat evil, right? That whole idea of like calling on a demon to help you, but then all of a sudden you've got to pay the piper. There are so many more of these kinds of stories, and I would love to do like a whole bathroom tour. But we're definitely going to do Comfort Station. And you know what? I'm going to try to mix some of these other legends that happen in these other bathrooms with it. And you can follow that, as you can follow everything on Tripping on Legends on any of our multiple media platforms. So you can go to Facebook. That's facebook.com/Tripping on Legends and subscribe. That is the dumping ground. That's where everything ends up. So that's the best place to subscribe to. But you can also give us a call anytime. You don't just have to do it during the live shows. Give us a call if you've got a legend that you want us to explore, or that a legend you kind of want to follow up on, or that you know information about. And that's 813-418-6822. We would love to hear from you via email, which is spookytripping@gmail.com. Spookytripping@gmail.com is actually also our Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter at SpookyBalzano. And of course, the website, which especially with all this time, I've got some interesting stories and travel logs that are going to be coming up the next couple of weeks, and that is trippingonlegends.wordpress.com. And of course, our primary thing is as a podcast. So go to iTunes, go to Stitcher, go to Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Review us if you can. But also subscribe, because we've got a whole bunch of different kinds of episodes coming up. We're trying to diversify what we're doing here. So it's going to be kind of interesting what we're going to be putting out there in podcast format. So you're going to definitely want to subscribe to us and get in contact with us on any of those platforms I just talked about. So for Christopher Balzano, this has been Tripping on Legends episode 66 and maybe episode 67, depending on how I cut it. I'm Christopher Balzano, and here's hoping that all of your trips are legendary. And be careful when you go to the bathroom, I guess, is the moral of this story. Have a great night.